I did not scream. I did not drop the vintage crystal flute. I simply stood there, freezing the toast in my throat, watching the structural integrity of my perfectly curated evening collapse in exactly 4 seconds. It was not just a disruption, it was a breach. Mrs. Patricia's prize-winning corgi did not just run through the garden. He exploded through the white lattice fence like a kinetic weapon, wood splintering into the crisp October air. The dog was barking with a frequency that triggered instant biological panic. He was not chasing a squirrel, he was fleeing a predator. My guests froze, the smile dying on 24 faces simultaneously. I looked at the shattered fence, then at the dark gap it left behind. The party was over. The siege had begun. Before the chaos unfolds, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. My brain attempted to file the event under accident, but the data refused to stick. The angle of the debris, the velocity of the dog, the guttural sound of a man cursing from inside Mrs. Patricia's kitchen, none of it aligned with the parameters of a block party. The social contract of a quiet Saturday afternoon had been voided, and I was standing there with a glass of Prosecco, waiting for a manager who did not exist. I looked at my roommates. They were not waiting. They were already moving. It was fascinating, really, to watch the veneer of civilization peel away in real time. There was no discussion, no committee meeting, just an immediate, silent shift from hospitality to defense. Alexander, who 5 seconds ago had been discussing the merits of apple cider glaze, reached across the grilling station. He did not grab a knife. He did not look for a phone. He picked up the 20-inch stainless steel barbecue tongs. He clicked them twice, clack. Clack, a sound that usually signaled burgers were ready, but now sounded like the racking of a shotgun slide. His eyes were dead level. He wasn't a barista anymore. He was a sentry with a gripping tool. To his left, Nicholas bypassed the fire extinguisher entirely. Instead, he walked over to the autumn display I had spent 3 hours arranging. He bent his knees, braced his core, and hoisted the 40-pound heirloom pumpkin I had selected for its symmetry. He didn't hold it like a vegetable. He held it like a siege weapon. Benjamin kicked the cord of the leaf blower into the outlet and revved the engine, the machine screaming to life with a deafening roar that vibrated in my chest. I stood there, analyzing the tableau. Why were we arming ourselves with gourds and landscaping equipment? It wasn't stupidity. It was a glitch in the human operating system. When the brain is confronted with a threat that has no pre-written script, no burglar protocol stored in the amygdala, it panics. It frantically scans the environment for anything that signifies power or control. In a war zone, you grab a rifle. In a suburban driveway during peak foliage season, you grab a pumpkin. It is a moment of profound cognitive dissonance, where the mind forces the mundane to become martial, because doing something, however absurd, is the only antidote to the paralysis of terror. We weren't thinking about efficiency. We were thinking about survival. And apparently, survival looked like a squash. The back door of Mrs. Patricia's house flew open. A figure stumbled out, dressed in black, clutching a pillowcase that bulged with jagged, expensive shapes. He was wearing a ski mask, which seemed insultingly cliché against the backdrop of my carefully curated fall aesthetic. He stopped when he saw us. He saw the tongs. He saw the leaf blower. He saw the pumpkin. And for a split second, I saw the confusion mirror my own. He had expected an alarm system or maybe a dog. He had not expected a localized militia armed with the harvest. I didn't feel fear. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. This man had violated the sanctuary of my neighborhood. He had terrified a dog. He had ruined my toast. And he was about to learn that in this cul-de-sac, we didn't call the authorities. And wait, we improvised. Alexander stepped forward, the tongs extended like a spear. The party was officially over. The patrol was active. The burglar did not freeze. He did not drop the pillowcase. Instead, he made a calculation that I found personally insulting. He decided we were a joke. He looked at Alexander's tongs, then at Nicholas's pumpkin, and he smirked beneath the mask. He tightened his grip on the pillowcase, which I now realized contained Mrs. Patricia's vintage silver tea service, judging by the sharp corners, and he charged. He didn't run away from us. He ran through us, assuming that suburbanites would scatter like pigeons at the first sign of aggression. He was wrong. Benjamin was the first to engage. He didn't swing the leaf blower. He aimed it. He pulled the trigger, and a jet of air moving at 200 miles per hour hit the burglar directly in the face. It wasn't lethal, but it was disorienting. The burglar stumbled back, flailing, his ski mask rippling against his skin like a loose sail in a hurricane. He tried to pivot, to find a path that wasn't currently a wind tunnel, but he turned directly into Zachary. Zachary had been manning the DIY pizza station. He was currently holding a 5-pound bag of high-gluten flour. He didn't hesitate. He tore the bag open and dumped it with the precision of a chemical weapon. A white cloud exploded in the driveway, instantly coating the burglar from head to toe. He stopped looking like a threat and started looking like a very angry, very confused ghost. He was coughing, blindingly white, swatting at the air, trying to wipe the powder from his eyes. "Move!" he screamed, his voice muffled by the flour. He lunged forward again, blindly, driven by panic now. He was heading for the street. He was going to make it. And then Nicholas threw the pumpkin. It wasn't a toss. It wasn't a lob. It was a trebuchet launch. The 40-pound gourd sailed through the crisp autumn air with terrifying grace. I watched it rotate slowly, the orange skin catching the afternoon sun. A beautiful, organic cannonball. It connected with the burglar's chest with a sound that I will never forget. A dull, wet thud followed immediately by the sharp crack of the pumpkin splitting open. The kinetic energy was undeniable. The burglar didn't just stop, he folded. The air left his lungs in a wheezing whoosh, and he went down hard onto the asphalt, sliding back 2 feet from the momentum. He lay there, gasping, covered in white flour and orange pulp, a defeated specter of crime. The pillowcase had flown from his hand and landed near the fire pit, spilling silver spoons and a diamond tennis bracelet onto the gravel. My neighbors stood over him, chests heaving. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the burglar's wheezing breaths. I looked at my friends. They weren't just party guests anymore. They were a phalanx. Alexander stepped forward, clicking the tongs near the burglar's nose. "Stay down," he said, his voice devoid of its usual customer service cheer. "Or we get the squash." It was messy, it was chaotic, it was completely undignified. And as I looked at the flowers settling on my driveway like unseasonal snow, I realized something important. This wasn't justice. This was an eviction. We hadn't just protected property. We had defended the sanctity of our space with the only tools we had. The burglar groaned, trying to wipe pumpkin seeds from his eyes. He had come looking for victims. He had found a harvest festival from hell. The immediate physical threat had been neutralized by a gourd, but now we faced a logistical problem. A groaning, flour-covered man on my driveway, and a police response time that was currently averaging 45 minutes. He was starting to stir, his hands scrabbling for purchase on the pavement. Panic flickered at the edges of the group. If he got up, we'd have to hit him with another vegetable, and frankly, I was running out of produce. "Secure him," Megan said. Her voice cut through the murmurs like a knife. Megan worked in logistics for a shipping company. She didn't see a person. She saw unsecure cargo. She marched to the garage and returned not with rope, but with the industrial-grade supplies left over from my move last month. 3 rolls of heavy-duty, reinforced packing tape and a box of synthetic Halloween cobwebs. "Clear the area," she commanded. Benjamin and Zachary stepped back. Megan knelt beside the burglar. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed his ankles, slapped the tape down, and began to wind. Reap, reap. The sound was rhythmic, professional. She taped his ankles together, then moved up to his knees. The burglar tried to kick, but Megan just leaned her weight on his legs and kept rapping. Stop moving, she said, her tone the same one she used for difficult delivery drivers. You are currently a liability. It wasn't a fight anymore. It was a packaging operation. Alexander stepped in to help, holding the burglar's arms against his torso while Megan secured his wrists and chest. They didn't just restrain him. They immobilized him. Within 3 minutes, the man was encased in layers of clear plastic and gray adhesive. He looked less like a criminal and more like a human burrito prepped for deep freeze. But Megan wasn't done. Aesthetic is important, she muttered. She grabbed a bag of fake cobwebs and began winding the white sticky fibers around the tape. It was petty. It was unnecessary. It was brilliant. By the time she finished, he was completely swathed in white webbing, indistinguishable from the spooky decorations adorning the front porch. We hoisted him up. It took 4 of us, Benjamin, Nicholas, Alexander, and me grabbing a shoulder or a knee. He was heavy, dead weight, groaning muffled protests through the layer of flour still coating his face. We carried him to the front yard and propped him up against the hay bale next to a scarecrow. He slumped there, defeated, a prisoner of arts and crafts. I stepped back and looked at him. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, hard satisfaction. This man had violated our safety, but we had denied him his dignity. He wasn't a terrifying intruder anymore. He was a prop, a decoration. He was secure, he was silent, and he was absolutely not going anywhere until we decided he could. The transition from chaotic brawl to organized detention was complete. We hadn't just caught a burglar. We had processed him. The adrenaline was beginning to ebb, replaced by a strange, vibrating tension. We stood in a circle around our captive, the human burrito, waiting for the sirens that were still distant wails in the night air. The burglar had stopped struggling. He lay still, his breath puffing small clouds of white flour into the cool evening. He looked like a discarded stage prop, something left over from a haunted house that had gone terribly wrong. It was then that Mr. Henderson arrived. He was 72, a retired structural engineer who usually walked with a cane and a scowl, complaining about the placement of recycling bins. He had missed the battle, arriving late to the party with a bottle of Merlot and a confused expression. He limped through the gate, took in the scattered pumpkins, the white-coated driveway, and the mummified figure propped against the hay bale. He didn't ask what happened. He simply walked over to the prisoner, leaning in close, squinting through his bifocals. He studied the burglar's boots, expensive, heavy-duty hiking boots with a distinctive red lace. Then he peered at the eyes visible through the flour-caked ski mask. The burglar flinched, turning his head away. But it was too late. Mr. Henderson let out a sound that was half gasp, half snarl. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a glossy flyer, one of the dozens that had been circulating in the neighborhood for the past month. I know those boots, Mr. Henderson said, his voice trembling with a cold, hard rage. And I know those eyes. That's Tyler. The name hung in the air like smoke. Tyler, the young, charming security system salesman. The guy who had knocked on every door on Maple Street 3 weeks ago, wearing a soft flannel shirt and a disarming smile. The guy who had patted Mrs. Patricia's corgi complimented my fall decor and offered free security assessments to help us protect our homes. He hadn't just been selling alarms, he had been casing the joint. He knew who had cameras, he knew who had dogs, he knew who was out of town. A collective gasp went through the group, followed immediately by a wave of nausea. This wasn't a random addict or a desperate stranger. This was a violation of trust so profound it felt physical. He had looked us in the eye, shaken our hands, and memorized our vulnerabilities. The flour-covered figure on the ground wasn't a monster. He was a parasite who had fed on our fears to rob us blind. Tyler began to whimper, the sound muffled by the tape. "It's not what it looks like," he tried to say, but the lie died in his throat. The mood in the yard shifted instantly. The absurdity of the pumpkin fight evaporated, replaced by a sharp, icy fury. He had used our politeness against us. He had weaponized our desire for safety. And now, seeing him bound and helpless, I didn't feel like laughing anymore. I felt like ending him. Not with violence, but with something far more permanent. The anger in the yard was palpable, a live wire looking for a ground. Alexander stepped forward, his knuckles white on the tongs, and for a second, I thought he might actually strike. But violence is messy, and it creates martyrs. We didn't want to hurt Tyler. We wanted to dismantle him. We wanted to take the fear he had planted in our homes and shove it back down his throat. "Get the phone," I said to Megan. "We're not waiting for the police report. We're doing an unboxing." Megan understood immediately. She pulled out her phone and hit record. I stepped into the frame, adopting the bright, chirpy persona of a lifestyle influencer, a mask I wore to hide the rage boiling beneath my skin. I knelt beside the pillowcase Tyler had dropped. It was heavy, clinking with the sound of stolen memories. "Hey guys," I said to the camera, my voice dripping with saccharine venom. "Welcome back to the channel. Today, we have a very special unboxing from a local small business entrepreneur named Tyler. He specializes in unauthorized redistribution, and let me tell you, the packaging is terrible." I reached into the pillowcase and pulled out Mrs. Patricia's silver teapot. I held it up to the light, turning it so the camera could catch the tarnish. First up, we have this vintage piece. Honestly, 0 out of 10 for selection. Heavy, hard to fence, and really just a cliche choice for a modern burglar. Do better, Tyler. The neighbors caught on. The tension broke, replaced by a dark, manic humor. Nicholas leaned in. "Look at this," he said, pulling out a laptop. "A 2018 model? Really?" The resale value is negligible. It's embarrassing, honestly. We proceeded to roast every item in his stash. We mocked his choices, we critiqued his technique, we treated his grand criminal enterprise like a failed subscription box. And Tyler? He was disintegrating. He squirmed in his tape cocoon, desperation leaking from his eyes. "Stop," he begged, his voice cracking. "Please, stop filming. Just call the cops, please." He wasn't afraid of jail. He was afraid of this. He was afraid of being laughed at. He was afraid of being stripped of his master criminal mystique and revealed as a bumbling, uncreative hack who got taken down by a pumpkin. This is the justice of the jester, the profound psychological truth that ridicule is a more potent weapon than force. By turning the monster into a meme, we shrank him. He couldn't haunt our nightmares anymore because we were too busy laughing at his poor taste in stolen goods. We hadn't just caught him, we had deleted his power. The blue lights finally swept across the front lawn, cutting through the darkness. 2 officers approached the scene, hands resting on their holsters, ready for a confrontation. They stopped dead when they saw the tableau. A flower ghost mummy, wrapped in moving tape, surrounded by pumpkins, with 24 people drinking wine and laughing. The older officer walked up to Tyler, poked the pumpkin debris on his chest, and looked at me. "Is that a gourd?" he asked. "Tactical squash," I replied, deadpan. He let out a snort that turned into a full-bellied laugh. He radioed dispatch, his voice shaking with mirth. "Suspect apprehended. You're not going to believe the containment method." They loaded Tyler into the back of the cruiser. As the car pulled away, the younger officer rolled down the window and snapped a selfie with the pumpkin patrol in the background. Tyler looked small, defeated, and utterly ridiculous in the back seat. When the taillights faded, silence returned to the cul-de-sac. But it wasn't the polite, separated silence of before. We gathered around the fire pit, the adrenaline crashing into exhaustion. Alexander poured fresh wine. "Mrs." Patricia brought out a tray of cookies she had apparently baked during the siege. We sat there, covered in flour and sweat, and we looked at each other. I looked at Benjamin, the quiet accountant who had wielded a leaf blower like a flamethrower. I looked at Megan, the logistics manager who could incapacitate a man in 3 minutes. I realized I had lived next to these people for 3 years and never truly known them. We had exchanged waves and holiday cards, but we hadn't been a community. We had been proximity associates. True connection, I realized, isn't built in the comfort of a perfectly planned party. It is forged in the fires of shared chaos. It is the trauma bond that comes from standing shoulder to shoulder against the threat, armed with nothing but kitchen tools and produce. The masks of politeness had been burned away, leaving something raw and real and incredibly strong. Same time next year? Nicholas asked, kicking a piece of pumpkin shell. Absolutely, I said. But next year, I'm buying bigger tongs. If this story made you laugh or rethink your own neighborhood watch, hit that share button. Let's spread some pumpkin justice today.